Hey guys, tonight we slip into the torchlit shadows of medieval Europe, where love wasn't just a feeling, it was a battlefield. Picture yourself in a bustling castle courtyard, stone walls echoing with the clatter of hoofs and the chatter of servants. You're dodging puddles of questionable origin, your heart racing as you catch the eye of someone across the crowd. Sparks fly, but here's the kicker: one wrong move and you're tangled in a web of chivalric codes, angry barons, or worse, a priest with a grudge. You probably won't survive this unscathed, romantically or otherwise. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and the local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in that courtyard, and the air smells of wood smoke and fresh bread from the bakehouse. Dating in medieval times wasn't about swiping right or grabbing coffee. It was a high-stakes dance, governed by rules you'd need a parchment scroll to list. Chivalry, that romantic buzzword, was the big player for nobles. Born in the 12th century, it demanded knights show devotion to their ladies through grand gestures. Think jousting with her ribbon tied to your lance, or swearing eternal loyalty while never expecting a kiss. Sounds dreamy, right? Except most knights were more sweaty than swoon-worthy, and their pure love often hid less noble intentions. Historians still argue whether chivalry was a genuine code of honor, or just a fancy excuse for men to peacock around. For you, a young noble courtship starts with eyes meeting across a banquet hall. You're not free to just stroll over and chat. Oh no. First, you've got to navigate a maze of social signals. A dropped handkerchief might be an invitation or a trap. You'd better know the difference because her father's watching and he's got a sword. If you're a woman, your job is to look demure, while dropping just enough hints to keep him interested without seeming loose. One quirky tidbit: some noble women tied love knots, intricate braids of ribbon or hair, to gift their suitors a subtle way to say, "I'm interested, but don't get cocky." These knots were so prized, men carried them into battle like talismans. Bet you didn't expect medieval flirting to involve DIY crafts. But it's not all poetry and ribbons. You're under constant scrutiny. Your family's honor, your future, and maybe even a few acres of land hinge on who you're eyeing. If you're a man, your parents are already scheming to pair you with a bride who brings a juicy dowry. If you're a woman, your virtue is your currency, and one misstep could tank your marriage prospects. The pressure's suffocating like wearing a corset during a heat wave. And don't even think about sneaking off for a quick smooch. Chaperones are everywhere, and they're not above ratting you out for a few coins. Let's toss in a light joke. Imagine trying to flirt while your nosy aunt hovers like a hawk, muttering about your sinful gaze. You'd need the stealth of a ninja to steal a moment alone. Another reality check: not everyone's playing by the same rules. While nobles fuss over chivalry, the servants sneaking around the stables are far less restrained. They've got their own ways of sparking romance, but we'll get to that later. For now, you're stuck in this courtyard, heart-pounding, wondering if that glance was a promise or a warning. The game of medieval love has just begun, and you're already in over your head. You've left the castle's polished chaos behind, and now you're trudging through a muddy village lane, the air thick with the scent of hay and livestock. This is where most medieval folks live, tight-knit hamlets where everyone knows your business. Dating here isn't about grand gestures or silk ribbons. It's a gritty, gossip-fueled gauntlet. You're a villager, maybe a baker's kid or a weaver's apprentice, and every stolen glance at the market square feels like a roll of the dice. Your heart's set on someone, but the whole village is watching and they've got opinions. Loud ones. Life in a medieval village circa 1300 was a communal affair. Records show most people married within their hamlet, often to someone they'd known since childhood. Your pool of potential sweethearts is small. Think a dozen eligible faces tops. You've grown up with them, shared chores, maybe even thrown mud at each other as kids. Now those childhood pals are potential spouses and the shift is awkward. You're eyeing the blacksmith's son, his arms strong from the forge, or the miller's daughter who's quick with a laugh, but making a move. That's where it gets tricky. Your parents have a say and they're not shy about it. They're already sizing up your crush's family. Do they own land? Are they good for a loan? Love's nice, but survival's the priority. The quirky bit, some villages had bundling customs where you and your sweetheart could share a bed fully clothed, mind you to talk under supervision. It was meant to test on compatibility, but let's be real, plenty of couples pushed the boundaries, giggling under the watchful eye of a dozing chaperone. Historians still argue whether bundling was a sweet tradition or a sneaky way to rush couples into marriage. Either way, you're lying there heart-racing praying your parents don't barge in. The village square is your Tinder. You're at the well hauling water when you catch your crush's eye. A smile passes, but you've got to be slick. Gossip spreads faster than a barn fire. If you linger too long, the baker's wife is whispering about loose morals by sundown. And if you're a woman, the stakes are higher. Your reputation is everything, and one rumor could see you shunned, or worse, dragged to the church for a lecture on sin. Men have it easier, but not by much. If you're caught flirting with the wrong person like the Lord's servant, you're risking a beating or a fine. Here's a joke to lighten the mood. Imagine trying to flirt while your neighbor's pig wanders over snorting in your face. Romantic, right? Another hurdle your parents. They're not just meddling. They're basically your matchmakers. They'll push you towards someone suitable like the farmer with 2 cows, or the widow with a decent plot. You might fancy the dreamy-eyed shepherd, but if he's got no land, good luck convincing dad. And don't expect privacy. Houses are small, walls are thin, and your siblings are always eavesdropping. Sneaking a moment alone means dodging nosy neighbors and curious goats. But it's not all doom and gloom. Village life has its charms. You share dances at harvest festivals, your hands brushing during a reel. You swap small gifts, a carved wooden spoon, a woven bracelet tokens that say, "I'm serious," without words. These moments feel electric, like stealing honey from a hive. Still, every step is a gamble. If your crush's family disapproves, or if a rival starts spreading lies, your budding romance could crash before it starts. And the church, they're always lurking, ready to remind you that love's fine. But lust is a one-way ticket to hellfire. You're just trying to live love and not get caught in the village's judgmental crosshairs. Good luck. You're kneeling in a dim village church, the cold stone biting through your threadbare tunic, while a priest drones on about sin. The air's heavy with incense and the weight of judgment. You're here because the church isn't just a building. It's the iron fist, clamping down on your love life. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church held sway over every heartbeat, especially when it came to romance. You're trying to catch a glimpse of your sweetheart in the pews, but one wrong look could land you in a sermon about temptation. Faith and fear are your constant companions, and they're not great wingmen. By the 13th century, the church had cemented its role as the ultimate matchmaker or deal-breaker. It declared marriage a sacrament, meaning your love life wasn't just personal. It was divine business. You can't just fall for someone and tie the knot. The church demands you follow its rules: no marrying outside the faith, no sneaking off without a priest's blessing, and definitely no carnal urges before the vows. If you're smitten, you've got to get the priest's approval, And he's more interested in your soul than your sparks. The church's grip was so tight that it even set forbidden times for weddings. No nuptials during Lent or Advent. So you're stuck waiting, twiddling your thumbs while your heart aches. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests sold love charms on the sly, blessed trinkets or prayers to nudge your crush your way. These were technically frowned upon, but desperate lovers slipped coins to clergy for a bit of holy help. Historians still argue whether these charms were scams or genuine acts of pastoral care. Either way, you're tempted to buy one clutching a coin as you whisper prayers for courage. The church's rules feel like a leash. If you're a woman, you're told to be chaste, obedient, and silent qualities that make you marriageable but stifle your fire. Men aren't off the hook either. You're expected to prove your piety and provide for a family, or the priest might deem you unfit. And forget about privacy. The church required bans, public announcements of your intent to marry read 3 Sundays in a row. You stand there sweating as the whole village hears your plans. If anyone objects, say a jealous ex or a nosy neighbor, your wedding's on hold. It's like airing your love life on a medieval billboard. A quick joke, imagine the priest mispronouncing your crush's name during the banns, and now the village thinks you're marrying the local pig farmer. Awkward. Another hurdle, the church's obsession with consanguinity. You can't marry anyone too closely related, which sounds simple until you realize village bloodlines are tangled like yarn. The church might demand you trace your family tree back 7 generations. And if you're too close, your romance is doomed, unless you've got coins for a papal dispensation. Nobles could afford those. You, a villager, are out of luck. But it's not just rules cramping your style. The church shapes how you even think about love. Sermons paint it as a holy duty, not a wild passion. You're told to love properly, which means no stolen kisses or secret meetings by the river. Yet you're human. You sneak a glance at your beloved during Mass, your fingers brushing as you pass the peace candle. Those moments feel like defiance, tiny rebellions against the church's heavy hand. Remember that village gossip from before. The church amplifies it, turning whispers into accusations. One wrong step and you're facing penance, public shaming, or a fine you can't afford. You're just trying to love, but the church is watching and its shadow is long. You're sitting in a smoky hall, the fire crackling as your father haggles with another family across the table. The topic, not livestock or land, but your future. You're caught in the gears of an arranged marriage where love is less a spark and more a transaction. In medieval Europe, especially among nobles and wealthier peasants, marriage was a contract and you're the ink on the parchment. Your heart might flutter for someone else. But here, feelings take a back seat to alliances, property, and cold hard coin. By the 12th century, arranged marriages were the backbone of social order. Nobles used them to secure political ties or expand estates, while peasants aim for practical mergers. Think 2 farms joining forces. You're a daughter, maybe 15, or a son, barely 20, and your parents have been plotting this since you were in swaddling clothes. The deal's been struck, you're to wed someone you've barely met, maybe seen once at a fair. Your spouse-to-be brings a dowry. If you're a man, or a bride, price. If you're a woman, sealing your fate. The mainstream fact, these arrangements often ignored age gaps. Girls as young as 12 were betrothed to men twice their age, a practice justified by the need for heirs. The quirky tidbit, some contracts included bizarre clauses like a bride's family, throwing in a pig or a barrel of ale to sweeten the deal. Imagine your future hinging on a particularly plump sow. Historians still argue whether these marriages were purely pragmatic or if some couples found love despite the setup. You're hoping for the latter, but the odds feel slim. You're not just a pawn, you're a prize. If you're a woman, your dowry land money or goods is your ticket to a good match, but it's also a chain. Your family's honor rests on your obedience, and refusing the match could mean disownment or a convent's cold walls. Men have a bit more wiggle room, but not much. You might push for a bride with a bigger dowry, but if your father's set on an alliance, you're stuck. The negotiation table is tense, with both sides eyeing each other like merchants at a market. You steal a glance at your betrothed across the room, awkward, stiff, and clearly as nervous as you are. No one's asking if you click. Here's a joke. Imagine your dad boasting about your fine lineage while you're just praying your betrothed doesn't smell like the stable. The reality's harsher. You've heard stories of couples meeting on their wedding day, their first words exchanged at the altar. Some families let you meet beforehand, but it's less a date and more an inspection. You're judged on your health, your manners, even your teeth like a horse at auction. If you're a woman, your virginity is scrutinized. If you're a man, your ability to provide is under the microscope. Love. That's a luxury, something to maybe grow into like a pair of too tight shoes. But there's a flicker of agency. You might charm your betrothed with a shy smile or a clever quip, planting a seed for something real. Or you might hate them on sight, their laugh grating like a rusty hinge. Either way, the deal's done. The families clasp hands, tankards are raised, and you're left wondering how to navigate a life with a stranger. Remember those village gossips? They're already buzzing about the match, speculating on the dowry, or your betrothed's rumored temper. And the church, always looming, blesses the arrangement, reminding you this is God's will. You're trapped in a web of duty, with no Tinder to swipe your way out. All you can do is brace for the wedding and hope your new spouse doesn't snore. You're perched on a wooden bench at a grand tournament, the air buzzing with cheers, and the clash of lances. Dust swirls as knights in gleaming armor charge, each hoping to impress the crowd, and the lady whose favor they wear may be a scarf or ribbon tied to their helm. You're swept up in the romance of it all, heart-racing, as you imagine yourself as the damsel a knight might fight for. This is the world of chivalric ideals, where love is a performance, and knights and damsels play their parts in a glittering, dangerous game. But the songs and stories, they're not telling you the whole truth. Chivalry, codified in the 12th century, was the medieval equivalent of a Hollywood romance script. Knights were supposed to be noble, brave, and devoted, wooing their ladies with deeds of valor, think slaying metaphorical dragons or winning jousts. The mainstream fact troubadour poetry like that of Chrétien de Troyes spread these ideals, painting love as a quest, where knights serve their ladies without expecting ahem-based rewards. You're a noble woman fluttering your fan, or a young squire dreaming of earning a lady's smile. But here's the catch: most knights were rough around the edges warriors, more likely to belch than recite poetry. Their devotion often came with ulterior motives, and the damsel's role was to look pretty and stay untouchable. The quirky tidbit: some knights took chivalry to absurd lengths, like Ulrich von Liechtenstein, who reportedly jousted across Europe in a Venus costume to honor his lady. Talk about commitment or a midlife crisis. Historians still argue whether chivalry was a genuine attempt to refine rough men or just a romantic veneer for power plays. You're starting to suspect the latter. The tournament field is a stage, and you're in the audience caught up in the spectacle. If you're a lady, you're expected to play the part, tossing a token to a knight, blushing at his vows of eternal service. But it's a performance. You know his love is often strategic, aimed at winning your father's favor or a chunk of land. If you're a man, you're either a knight, risking a cracked skull for glory, or a bystander envying the heroes, while knowing you'll never afford the armor. Either way, the chivalric code feels like a script you can't rewrite. Flirt too openly, and you're scandalous. Ignore the game, and you're invisible. Here's a joke. Imagine a knight dedicating his victory to you, only to trip over his own lance mid-bow. Smooth. The reality's less funny. Chivalry's ideals clashed with gritty truths. Knights often had wives or betrothed back home, yet flirted shamelessly with other ladies under the guise of courtly love. You're left wondering if that knight's vow is heartfelt or just part of the show. And if you're a damsel, your reputation's on a knife's edge. One rumor of being too welcoming and you're ruined, like those village gossips love to whisper about. Yet there's magic in the fantasy. You clutch a knight's favor, a scrap of silk, and for a moment you believe the songs. You dream of a love that's bold and pure, even if the knight's armor smells of sweat, and his poetry's stolen from a minstrel. Remember that courtyard flirtation from the castle. This is its glossier cousin, but the stakes are just as high. One misstep and you're out of the game, shamed, sidelined, or worse, married off to a lesser lord to hush the scandal. You're caught in chivalry's spell, but you're starting to see the cracks in the fairy tale. You're hunched over a rickety table, in a flickering candlelit room, quill in hand, scratching words onto a scrap of parchment. Your heart's pounding not from the cold, seeping through the walls, but because you're writing a love letter, a dangerous act in medieval times. Every word is a risk, a secret, that could unravel your life if it falls into the wrong hands. You're pouring your soul into this note, hoping to reach your beloved, but one slip, and you're facing scandal, shame, or worse. In this world, love letters are both a lifeline and a loaded crossbow. In the 13th century, literacy was rare, but love letters were a prized art among nobles and the few educated commoners. Historical records like the letters of Abelard and Heloise show how lovers used the coded language to confess passion while dodging prying eyes. You're no scholar, but you've learned enough to scribble your feelings, maybe with help from a trusted servant or a monk with a soft spot. Your letter's not just words, it's a rebellion against the rigid rules of courtship you've been navigating since that castle courtyard. But sending it, that's where the real gamble begins. The quirky tidbit some lovers use. Messenger birds, not quite pigeons, more like trained hawks to carry notes, though most relied on sneaky servants or bribed go-betweens. One wrong choice and your billet doux is read aloud in the village square. Historians still argue whether these letters were mostly romantic or strategic, often doubling as tools for political alliances. You're just hoping your words don't end up pinned to a church door. You dip your quill ink, smudging your fingers, and choose your words carefully. No, I love you in plain terms, that's too bold. Instead, you weave metaphors, calling your beloved a rose among thorns, or swearing to be their humble knight. It's poetry, but it's also camouflage. If intercepted, you can claim it's just courtly flattery, not a scandalous plea. You're sweating though because parchment's expensive and so is trust. The servant you hand this to might be loyal, or they might trade your secret for a few coins. And if your beloved's father finds it, you're looking at a forced marriage to someone else, or a one-way trip to a monastery. Here's a joke. Imagine your letter getting delivered to the wrong noble, and now a grumpy baron thinks you're wooing him. Good luck explaining that. The stakes are no laughing matter though. If you're a woman, a leaked letter could brand you as wanton, tanking your marriage prospects. Men face less ruin, but a public shaming stings, and your family's honor takes a hit. Remember those village gossips? They'd feast on this, spinning your tender words into sordid tales. Even the church, always looming, might get involved preaching about lust while you're forced to do penance on your knees. Yet the thrill is worth it. You seal the letter with wax, maybe pressing a ring or a knot of hair into it. A nod to those love knots from the courtyard days. When you hand it off, your stomach churns, but there's a spark of hope. If your beloved reads it, if they reply, It's a bridge between you, a fragile thread in a world that wants to keep you apart. You're defying the rules despise, the whole suffocating system, just for a chance at something real. Now you wait praying the messenger's swift and the fates are kind. You're weaving through a chaotic village festival, the air alive with the twang of lutes and the scent of roasted chestnuts. Torches cast flickering shadows as you dodge jugglers, drunkards, and a stray goose. This is your moment. Medieval fairs and feasts were the closest thing to a dating app where you can steal glances, brush hands, and maybe spark something under the cover of the crowd's roar. You're here to flirt, but it's a tightrope walk. One bold move could light up your love life or set the gossips ablaze. By the 14th century, festivals like May Day or harvest feasts were social pressure valves, where rigid medieval rules loosened just enough for romance to bloom. Historical accounts describe young people dancing in rings, exchanging garlands, or competing in games to catch a crush's eye. You're in the thick of it, heart racing as you spot your beloved across the bonfire. The crowd's a shield, but it's also a spotlight. Everyone's watching, from nosy neighbors to that priest who's never off duty. Your goal: connect without crossing the line into scandal. The quirky tidbit: some festivals had mock marriages where couples were wed for a day, complete with playful vows and a shared tankard of ale. These were meant as fun, but more than a few real romances sparked from the charade. Historians still argue whether these rituals were harmless flirtations or sneaky ways to test matches before betrothals. You're tempted to join in, but the crowd's eyes make you cautious. You step into a dance, your hand grazing your crushes as you spin through a reel. The music's lively, but your moves are calculated. You're signaling interest without saying a word. If you're a woman, you keep your gaze coy, letting a smile do the talking. If you're a man, you might flex a little, showing off in an archery contest or a wrestling match. But the rules are strict. Too much giggling, and the village matrons start whispering about loose morals. Too forward, and you're hauled before the church like that poor soul who got caught kissing behind the ale tent last year. Here's a joke. Imagine tripping into a pig trough mid-dance, only to look up and see your crush laughing. Instant mood killer. The reality's tougher. Festivals are a rare chance to mingle, but they're also a minefield. Parents hover, sizing up potential matches for those arranged marriages we talked about. If you're eyeing someone unsuitable, say a servant or a rival family's kid, you're risking more than gossip. A public flirt could lead to a private beating or a rushed betrothal to someone else to fix your behavior. Remember those village gossips? They're here, clutching their cider, ready to turn your shy glance into a full-blown tale of debauchery. Still, the festival's magic is irresistible. You share a sweetmeat from a vendor, your fingers brushing as you split the sticky treat. You join a game of Hoodman Blind, where the blindfolded seeker gropes for players innocent enough, but a chance to accidentally bump into your beloved. These moments feel like stolen treasure, brighter than the torches overhead. Even the church, grumbling about pagan revelry, can't fully dampen the mood. You're dancing on the edge of freedom, weaving through the crowd, hoping this night plants a seed for something lasting. But as the music fades, you know the real world, its rules, its watchers will be waiting at dawn. You're squeezed into a cramped village hall, the air thick with the smell of ale and freshly baked bread as two families haggle like merchants at a market. You're not here for a feast, though this is about dowries and bride prices, the cold calculus of medieval marriage. Your future's on the table, reduced to livestock land or a sack of silver. Love might be a distant hope, but right now you're a commodity, and your family's driving a hard bargain. In this world, romance is a business, and you're the deal of the day. By the 13th century, dowries and bride prices were non-negotiable in most of Europe. A dowry, goods or property a bride's family offered, was the ticket to a good match, especially for nobles or wealthier peasants. For men, a bride price might be paid to the bride's family, proving you could support her. The mainstream fact dowries could make or break a family's status. A hefty dowry might land a noble daughter a titled husband, but a poor one could doom her to a lesser match or spinsterhood. You're caught in this web watching your parents barter, while you pray for a spouse who's at least kind. The quirky tidbit some dowry deals included oddities like a single chicken or a rusty heirloom sword thrown in to seal the agreement. Imagine your worth pegged to a clucking hen. Historians still argue whether dowries empowered women by giving them leverage or trapped them as bargaining chips. You're feeling more like the latter sitting there as the room buzzes with numbers and promises. Your father's voice rises, demanding more land from your betrothed's family. You steal a glance at your future spouse, who looks as uncomfortable as you feel. If you're a woman, your dowry's your shield and your cage. It's meant to secure your future, but it also means you're bought. A good dowry might include linens, a cow, or even a small plot. A great one could mean gold or a vineyard. But if your family's poor, you're stuck with a meager offering and your prospects dim. If you're a man, you're expected to match or outdo the dowry with your own contribution prove you're no freeloader. Either way, the haggling's brutal, like watching your life auctioned off. Here's a joke. Imagine your dad tossing in a goat to sweeten the deal only for it to chew your betrothed's cloak mid-negotiation. Deal breaker maybe. The reality's less amusing. These talks could drag on for weeks with families feuding over every penny. If the deal falls through, you're back to square one, your reputation dinged. And the pressure's intense. Your family's counting on this to climb the social ladder. Or at least not starve next winter. Remember those arranged marriages. This is their foundation built on coin, not chemistry. But there's a flicker of humanity amid the transaction. You catch your betrothed's eye, maybe share a nervous smile. You're both pawns, but that shared glance feels like a tiny rebellion against the ledger. Some couples you've heard manage to weave love into these deals, like ivy growing over stone. You hope for that, but right now you're just praying the families agree before someone storms out. The church, always watching, blesses the deal once it's set, reminding you this is God's plan. The village gossips are already buzzing, guessing the dowry size or your betrothed's worth. You're trapped in a game where love's a footnote and all you can do is hope the price was right. You're stealing through the moonlit woods, heart hammering as you dodge branches and praying no one's followed. You're meeting your beloved in secret, a forbidden love that could burn brighter than a festival bonfire or torch your life to ashes. In medieval Europe, crossing lines of class, faith, or family feuds was a dangerous game, and you're playing with stakes higher than a castle tower. Every rustle in the dark feels like a spy, and every moment with your sweetheart is stolen from a world that wants to keep you apart. Forbidden romances weren't just the stuff of minstrel tales. They were real and perilous. By the 14th century, social and religious boundaries were rigid. Nobles didn't mix with peasants. Christians didn't wed Jews or Muslims. And feuding families saw love as betrayal. The mainstream fact eloping or defying family wishes could lead to exile, disownment, or even execution in extreme cases, especially if you crossed religious lines. You're risking it all for a whispered promise, knowing one wrong move could end in disaster. The quirky tidbit, some lovers left secret marks on trees or stones, carved hearts or initials to signal meeting spots or prove their devotion. These signs were romantic, but risky, like leaving a neon sign for nosy villagers. Historians still argue whether these acts were desperate cries of passion or calculated moves to force families into accepting the match. You're just hoping your carved heart doesn't become evidence against you. You reach the clearing and there they are, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Your beloved is everything the world says you can't have, maybe a servant when you're a lord's child, or from a rival clan that's hated your kin for generations. The thrill of their touch is electric, but fear gnaws at you. If you're caught, the consequences are brutal. Women faced harsher judgment laws of dowry confinement, or worse, accusations of witchcraft if the affair seemed unnatural. Men might escape with a fine or a thrashing, but their honor took a hit. And the church, it's ready to brand you both sinners, dragging you to confession or public penance. Here's a joke. Imagine sneaking through the woods only to trip over a monk napping off his ale. Stealth level 0. The reality is grimmer. You've heard tales of lovers banished or forced into monasteries, their names cursed by kin. Remember those village gossips? They're your worst enemy now, eager to turn a glimpsed shadow into a scandal. Even your family, who haggled over your dowry, might disown you to save face. You're defying the rules of that courtyard flirtation, the church's iron grip every boundary you've been taught. Yet the danger fuels the fire. You and your beloved whisper plans. Maybe you'll run away, find a distant village where no one knows your names. Or maybe you'll confront your families, banking on their love to outweigh their fury. These moments, fleeting as they are, feel like freedom. You exchange a token, a ring, a lock of hair, knowing it's both a promise and a risk. The night hides you, but dawn won't. As you part, you're already plotting the next meeting, wondering if love this fierce can survive a world so cruel. For now, you hold tight to the memory of their hand in yours, a spark worth every shadow. You're gliding through a candlelit hall, silk rustling as you nod demurely to a knight who's just sworn to serve you forever. His words are honeyed, his bow practiced, but your smile hides a secret. This is courtly love, a glittering game where devotion is declared but rarely meant. In the high courts of medieval Europe, you're playing a part, adoring from afar, never crossing into improper territory. It's romance wrapped in rules, a dance of longing and restraint that's as thrilling as it is fake. You're in deep and the whole court's watching. Courtly love, popularized in the 12th century through poets like Andreas Capellanus, was a cultural phenomenon among nobles. It framed love as a noble pursuit where a knight worshipped his lady, often married to someone else, with poetry songs and gallant deeds, all while keeping it pure. The mainstream fact this idealized love was less about real relationships and more about social status, letting knights and ladies flex their charm without supposedly breaking vows. You're a noblewoman basking in the flattery, or a knight crafting verses to win favor, but you know it's mostly theater. The quirky tidbit, some ladies gifted their knights tokens like a sleeve or glove, which they'd wear in tournaments, basically medieval merch for their brand. These were less about love and more about publicity. Historians still argue whether courtly love was a harmless flirtation or a covert way to justify affairs. You're leaning toward the latter given the heated glances you're dodging. You're at the heart of the game, balancing desire and decorum. If you're the lady, you're expected to inspire devotion. Without giving too much, drop a handkerchief, sure, but never your guard. Your knight's vows sound passionate, but you suspect he's angling for your husband's patronage or a boost in courtly clout. If you're the knight, you're pouring your heart into a poem you half stole from a troubadour, hoping it earns you a smile or a better seat at the feast. Either way, the court's a stage and everyone's a critic. One misstep, like a too bold glance and whispers of scandal, ripple through the tapestries. Here's a joke. Imagine reciting your epic love poem only to realize you've mixed up your lady's name with the cook's. Instant demotion to jester. The reality's trickier. Courtly love was a tightrope. You're supposed to pine passionately but never act on it, at least not openly. Some couples pushed the boundaries, risking everything for a stolen kiss. But most kept it platonic to avoid ruin. Remember those forbidden trysts in the woods? This is their polished cousin cloaked in etiquette, but just as risky. The church, ever vigilant, eyed these games warily, ready to preach against worldly vanities if things got too spicy. Yet the facade is intoxicating. You revel in the knight's flattery even if you know it's half-scripted. You pen a reply veiled in metaphors about roses and hawks, keeping it vague enough to dodge trouble. The court buzzes with speculation. Everyone's guessing who's serving whom. Those village gossips would kill for this drama. But here, it's dressed in velvet. You're caught in the spell, wondering if real love could slip through the cracks of this charade. For now, you play along your heart a secret. Even you're not sure you trust as the music swirls and the game goes on. You're trudging through a muddy field, the sun barely up your hands, calloused from hauling grain. Love feels like a distant luxury when survival's your daily grind. As a peasant in medieval Europe, your days are filled with backbreaking labor, plowing, sowing, dodging the Lord's tax collector. Yet even here in the dirt and sweat, you steal moments for passion, snatching glances at your sweetheart by the mill or whispering plans under a haystack. Romance for you isn't courtly poetry or castle flirtations. It's a stubborn spark that burns despite the grind. Peasant life in the 14th century was relentless, with most of Europe's population tied to the land. Historical records show peasants married for practical reasons, shared labor, merged plots, but love often bloomed in the margins. You're not dreaming of knights or dowries. You just want someone to share the load and maybe a laugh at day's end. The mainstream fact peasant marriages were often arranged by families, but unlike nobles, you had some wiggle room to choose within your village as long as the match didn't upset the harvest or the landlord. The quirky tidbit: some peasants used hand-fasting rituals, tying their hands with a cord during a betrothal to symbolize unity. Less formal than a church wedding, but just as binding in the village's eyes. Historians still argue whether hand-fasting was a romantic gesture or a practical way to seal deals without a priest. You're hoping it's the former as you eye your beloved across the field. Your life's a far cry from those tournament fields or candlelit courts. You're up at dawn feeding chickens or mending nets, but love finds a way. You bump into your sweetheart at the well, trading a shy smile, as you both pretend to care about water buckets. These moments are fleeting. There's always a cow to milk or a fence to fix, but they're gold. If you're a woman, you're juggling chores and the pressure to stay respectable. One rumor and the village gossips still buzzing from that festival could ruin you. If you're a man, you're proving your worth not with jousts, but with a steady hand at the plow, showing her family you're no slouch. Here's a joke. Imagine trying to flirt while a goat steals your lunch. Romantic ambiance ruined. The reality's tougher. Time's your enemy, there's no lingering when the fields need tending. And privacy, forget it. Your family's crammed into a one-room hut, and neighbors are always poking around. Sneaking a kiss means risking a lecture from the priest who's still grumpy about sinful festival dances. Those church rules we talked about. They're just as suffocating here, demanding you keep your urges in check until a proper betrothal. Still, you carve out space for love. You share a crust of bread at noon, sitting on a stump, or slip your beloved a wildflower plucked from the hedgerow. These aren't grand gestures, but they're yours. You might even sneak to the barn at dusk, whispering dreams of a shared heart. The village's rhythm work, eat, sleep, doesn't stop for romance, but you make it work threading love through the cracks of a hard life. You're not sure if handfasting's in your future, but for now, that stolen glance across the field is enough to keep you going. You're standing in the village square, heart pounding as you clasp hands with your beloved, surrounded by family and a muttering priest. This is your betrothal, a public vow that locks you into marriage with the weight of iron chains. In medieval Europe, betrothals weren't just promises, they were binding contracts often more serious than the wedding itself. You're staring into your sweetheart's eyes, trying to read their thoughts, but the crowd's eyes bore into you, and there's no turning back. Love or not, you're committed, and the whole village knows it. By the 13th century, betrothals were a cornerstone of medieval society, especially among peasants and lower nobles. Canon law required a public exchange of consent, often sealed with a ring or a shared cup of ale, to make the promise legally binding. The mainstream fact, once betrothed, breaking the vow was nearly impossible without a costly legal battle or a bishop's intervention. And even then, you'd face social ruin. You're stuck whether your heart's in it or just along for the ride, a far cry from those fleeting festival glances. The quirky tidbit, some betrothals included a gift of earnest like a coin or a knife, handed over to prove the deal was serious. Think of it as a medieval engagement deposit. Historians still argue whether these rituals were heartfelt pledges or just another layer of family control. You're clutching that coin, wondering if it's a symbol of love or a leash. The ceremony's simple but intense. You and your beloved stand before witnesses, parents, neighbors, maybe a local lord, declaring your intent to wed. The priest mutters, Latin blessing the union, but his real job is to ensure no one's related or already promised elsewhere. You're sweating, half expecting someone to shout an objection, like in those church bands we talked about. If you're a woman, your dowry's already been haggled over, and your family's banking on this to secure their future. If you're a man, you've promised to provide, and everyone's watching to see if you'll deliver. The crowd's not just here to celebrate, they're enforcers ready to shame you if you bolt. Here's a joke. Imagine dropping the betrothal ring into a puddle, mid-vow, with the priest glaring like you've cursed the saints. Clumsy much, the reality's heavier. Betrothals were public to prevent secret deals, or forbidden loves like those moonlit trysts in the woods. Once you're pledged, the village gossips, still chattering from the festival, spread the news, and your life's no longer your own. If you change your mind, you're not just breaking a heart, you're breaching a contract. Penalties range from fines to excommunication, and good luck finding another match after that. Yet there's a flicker of hope. You lock eyes with your beloved, and for a moment, it's just you two. Maybe this was an arranged match, or maybe it's the peasant passion you've been nurturing between field chores. Either way, the vow feels real, even if it's wrapped in obligation. You exchange a token, a ribbon, a clasp, echoing those love knots from the castle days. The crowd cheers, tankards clink, but the weight of the promise settles in. You're bound now, not just to your beloved, but to a future you can't fully see. The wedding's still ahead, but this moment raw and public is where your path is set. You're standing in a raucous village feast, the air thick with the smell of roasted boar and spilled ale, as your wedding day unfolds in a whirlwind of chaos. The church bells have rung, your vows are sealed, and now the real spectacle begins. Medieval nuptials were less about quiet romance and more about a loud, messy celebration that the whole community crashed. You're at the center, half dazed, half thrilled as neighbors shout toasts, and your new spouse grins nervously. But beneath the revelry, there's a current of expectation from the feast to the infamous betting ritual. And you're just trying to keep up. In the 14th century, weddings were public affairs, especially for peasants and lower nobles. After the church ceremony, the feast was a chance to show off wealth or fake it, and cement alliances. The mainstream fact these events could last days with food, music, and dancing that strained family budgets but boosted social clout. You're swept into the chaos, your dowry's worth now on display in the spread of bread meat and maybe a rare cask of wine. Everyone's here, family, neighbors, even the local lord's lackeys eating your food and judging your match. The quirky tidbit, some weddings ended with a bedding ceremony where the couple was escorted to their marital bed by rowdy guests who'd shout crude jokes or inspect the sheets for proof of consummation. Talk about an audience. Historians still argue whether this was a fertility ritual or just a nosy tradition to ensure the marriage was official. You're dreading it, hoping the crowd's too drunk to follow through. The feast is a blur. You're plied with ale, your cheeks aching from forced smiles as uncles slap your back and aunts whisper about your spouse's family. The music's wild fiddles and drums urging everyone to dance, including you. You spin with your beloved hands clasped, but it's less romantic than it sounds when a cousin's spilling cider on your shoes. If you're a woman, you're expected to glow with modesty. If you're a man, you're proving your generosity by keeping the tables laden. Those village gossips still buzzing from your betrothal are here, eyeing every detail for their next tale. Here's a joke. Imagine your drunk uncle leading a toast, only to fall face first into the stew. Cheers to family pride. The reality's more intense. The feast isn't just fun, it's a contract showing the village your marriage is legit. Every guest is a witness, tying you tighter to those binding vows. And then there's the bedding ritual looming. As the night wears on, the rowdier guests start chanting ready to march you to the bedchamber. You're blushing, your spouse is stammering, and you both pray for a quick escape. Some couples dodged it, but tradition's a beast, and the crowd's relentless. Despite the chaos, there's magic. You steal a quiet moment with your spouse, sharing a hunk of bread or a fleeting glance that says, "We're in this together." It's a callback to those stolen field moments or festival dances now made real. The church, still hovering, blesses the union, but frowns at the debauchery, reminding you to keep things holy. As the feast winds down, you're exhausted, tipsy, and a little terrified of what's next. The wedding's a triumph, but it's also a gauntlet, and you're just glad to have survived the day mostly intact. You're lying in a creaky bed, the straw mattress prickling through the linens. Your new spouse beside you in the flickering glow of a single candle. The wedding feast's rowdy echoes still ring in your ears, but now it's just you two navigating the delicate dance of the marital bed. In medieval Europe, this wasn't just about love or lust. It was a political act tangled in duty expectations and the pressure to produce heirs. You're caught between desire and obligation, trying to figure out what this moment means for the life you've just begun. By the 14th century, marriage was a cornerstone of social order, and the marital bed was where alliances were sealed and dynasties secured. The mainstream fact consummation was often seen as the final step in making a marriage legally binding, especially for nobles, where producing an heir was non-negotiable. You're under scrutiny even in this private moment. Your family, the church, and maybe even the village expect results. If you're a noble, your union might cement a treaty. If you're a peasant, it's about ensuring hands to work the fields. Either way, the bed's a battlefield of sorts. The quirky tidbit, some couples were given fertility charms by family herbs, amulets, or even a blessed apple to boost their chances of conceiving. Imagine your mother-in-law slipping a sprig of rosemary under your pillow. Historians still argue whether these charms were heartfelt traditions or desperate bids to control the unpredictable. You're just hoping you don't sneeze from the herbs. You shift under the coarse blanket, your spouse's breath warm but hesitant. If you're a woman, the weight's heavier, your duty is to bear children, and your worth is tied to it. You've heard whispers of women shamed for barrenness, even if it's not their fault. If you're a man, you're expected to perform, proving your virility while being gentle enough to keep the church happy. The pressure's suffocating like wearing chainmail to bed, and privacy barely. Those thin walls from your peasant days or the servants lingering in the castle mean someone's always listening. Remember that bedding ritual. Its shadow lingers, making this feel less intimate and more like a public exam. Here's a joke. Imagine trying to get romantic while a mouse scurries across the bedframe eyeing your candle. Mood officially ruined. The reality's trickier. The church still meddling has rules even here. No unnatural acts. No sex during holy days. And definitely no enjoying it too much. Yet you're human. You and your spouse fumble through, maybe laughing at the awkwardness or finding comfort in each other's warmth. If this marriage was arranged like those dowry deals, you're learning each other's rhythms, hoping affection grows. If it's a love match like those stolen field moments, this feels like a victory. Despite the world's weight, there's a spark of hope. You talk softly, sharing fears or dreams, building a bridge in the dark. The bed's a space where you can finally be yourselves away from gossips, priests, and parents. But it's also a reminder of what's at stake. Your future, your family's honor, maybe even your survival. You're not just lovers. You're partners in a contract, and this night sets the tone. As the candle gutters out, you hold each other, wondering if this fragile intimacy can carry you through the years ahead. You're tiptoeing through a darkened manor, the floorboards creaking as you clutch a stolen moment with someone who isn't your spouse. Your heart's a drum, every shadow a threat, because adultery in medieval Europe was a high-stakes gamble. The thrill of forbidden passion pulls you forward, but the consequences, shame, punishment, or even death, loom like a storm cloud. You're risking everything for a taste of what you can't have, and the world outside this fleeting embrace is ready to make you pay. In the 14th century, adultery was a grave sin and a social crime, policed by both church and state. The mainstream fact punishments varied by region and class, but women faced harsher penalties, public humiliation fines, or confinement in convents, while men often escaped with lighter fines or social slaps. You're caught in this double standard, whether you're a noble sneaking into a lady's chamber or a peasant meeting by the mill. The church branded adultery a mortal sin, and secular laws could seize your property, or worse, especially if you crossed powerful families. The quirky tidbit: some communities practiced charibari, where neighbors mocked adulterers with noisy nighttime parades, banging pots and singing crude songs outside their homes. Imagine waking to a mob serenading your scandal. Historians still argue whether these rituals were justice or just cruel entertainment. You're praying you never find out firsthand. You're breathless, your lover's hand warm in yours, but fear sharpens every sense. If you're a woman, discovery could mean losing your dowry, your children, or your place in society. Noble or peasant, the stain sticks. Men risk less, but a cuckolded husband or a vengeful lord might demand blood. The church, still looming from those wedding vows, preaches repentance. But its courts could order you to walk barefoot through the village, a penitent in rags. Those village gossips, always hungry for drama, would turn your affair into a legend, like the forbidden trysts in the woods we whispered about. Every creak of the manor stairs feels like their judgment closing in. Here's a joke: imagine sneaking out only to trip over a sleeping guard dog, its bark announcing your secret to the whole castle. Stealth fail. The reality's darker. Adultery wasn't just personal, it threatened alliances, inheritances, and social order. If you're a noble, your affair could spark a feud or ruin a treaty tied to your marriage. If you're a peasant, it's your family's reputation on the line, maybe their livelihood. You've heard tales of lovers flogged or banished, their names cursed in sermons. Yet the pull is undeniable. Maybe your marriage was a cold arrangement forged in that dowry haggling, or maybe passion just bloomed where it shouldn't. Either way, you're here stealing what you can. There's a bittersweet edge to these moments. You and your lover whisper promises, maybe you'll run away. Start fresh where no one knows you. But deep down, you know the odds. The world's built to crush these sparks, not fan them. You'd trade a hurried kiss, memorizing their face before slipping back to your separate lives. The thrill's worth it for now, but you're already dreading the dawn, when duty and danger will drag you apart. You're not just defying your spouse. You're defying the church, the village, the whole suffocating system. And that defiance, reckless as it is, feels like the only thing keeping you alive. You're a widow standing in the doorway of your modest home. The weight of your late husband's absence, still heavy but no longer crushing. The village hums around you, and for the first time in years, you feel a flicker of freedom. In medieval Europe, widowhood wasn't just loss, it was a rare chance to steer your own romantic course. You're no longer bound by a husband's rules or a father's deals, and the possibility of new love on your terms is both thrilling and daunting. You're stepping into a new chapter, but the world's still watching, ready to judge. By the 14th century, widows held a unique position in society, especially if they inherited property or a trade. The mainstream fact, unlike married women or maidens, widows could often control their wealth and choose whether to remarry, particularly among peasants and the lower gentry. You're not rich, but your husband left you a small plot or a share of his workshop, giving you leverage most women never taste. You're eyeing a suitor, a kind-eyed baker maybe, or a widower with a steady hand. The choice is yours, but it's not without strings. The quirky tidbit some widows wore. Mourning rings woven from their late husband's hair, a sentimental nod that doubled as a signal they weren't rushing to remarry. Picture twisting that ring, debating whether to chase a new spark. Historians still argue whether widowhood empowered women, or just swapped one set of pressures for another. You're feeling both sides caught between liberty and expectation. You step into the market basket on your arm, and notice how the village sees you differently now. Men tip their caps, some with respect, others with a glint of opportunity. You're no longer the baker's wife. Defined by a man, you're a woman with agency. A rarity in this world of dowries and betrothals. But freedom comes with scrutiny. If you flirt too soon, those village gossips still chattering from your wedding feast will brand you shameless. Wait too long and they'll whisper you're too proud, hoarding your wealth. The church, always hovering, urges piety, suggesting a convent if you don't remarry. You roll your eyes, wanting neither a nun's veil nor a rushed bow. Here's a joke. Imagine a suitor wooing you with a loaf of bread, only it's stale. Guess he's not the need of your dreams. The reality's more complex. You're courted sometimes openly, sometimes through shy glances at church. A younger man might see you as a path to land. An older one might want companionship. You weigh their offers, knowing you can say no, a power you didn't have in that arranged marriage or those field flirtations. But choosing means balancing heart and head. Remarry, and you might lose your property to a new husband's control. Stay single, and you risk isolation or pressure from kin, eager to merge your assets with theirs. Still, there's joy in this newfound space. You invite a suitor to share a cup of ale, testing his humor, his heart. You're not stealing trysts or dodging priests. You're courting openly, a luxury those forbidden lovers could only dream of. Each step feels like reclaiming a piece of yourself, a chance to write a story that's yours. The village watches, but you're learning to care less. Widowhood's a door, cracked open, and you're ready to step through, whether alone or with someone new by your side. You're huddled in a dim corner of a village. Wise woman's hut, the air thick with the scent of dried herbs and wood smoke. She hands you a murky vial, whispering, "It'll make your beloved's heart race for you or keep them faithful." Love potions, charms, and elixirs were the medieval equivalent of a risky text message. A blend of hope, superstition, and a dash of desperation. You're dabbling in this murky magic not because you're reckless, but because love in this world feels like it needs a nudge from the unseen. Every sip of this brew is a leap of faith, and you're praying it doesn't backfire. In the 14th century, belief in love potions was widespread from peasants to nobles. Apothecaries and cunning folk peddled recipes, often herbs, like vervain or mandrake, sometimes weirder ingredients like toad spittle, claiming they could spark desire or bind a lover's heart. The mainstream fact these concoctions were part of a broader medieval fascination with alchemy and natural magic often tolerated unless they veered into witchcraft. You're clutching the vial hoping it's just herbs and not something that'll land you in a church court. The quirky tidbit, some potions were just spiced wine with a fancy name sold to gullible lovers who'd swoon over the placebo effect. Imagine paying a week's wages for what's basically mulled wine. Historians still argue whether these elixirs were scams, folk medicine, or a genuine attempt to harness love's mystery. You're betting on the last one, but your wallet's feeling lighter either way. You slip the vial into your cloak. The wise woman's warnings ringing in your ears. Use it sparingly. Don't let the priest see. If you're trying to win someone like that baker from the market, you might mix a drop into their ale at the next feast. If you're keeping a spouse faithful, maybe you sneak it into their morning porridge. But the risks are real. If it fails, you're out, coin and pride. If it's discovered, those village gossips, still buzzing from your widow's flirtations, will cry sorcery. The church, ever watchful, could haul you before a tribunal, especially if someone claims you've tampered with free will, a sin worse than adultery in their book. Here's a joke. Imagine slipping your potion into the wrong cup, and now the village grumps declaring undying love. Awkward cleanup ahead. The reality's scarier. Love potions straddle the line between harmless tradition and dangerous magic. Some women desperate to secure a husband or save a marriage faced accusations of witchcraft if their brews went wrong or worked too well. Men used them too, but women bore the brunt of suspicion. You're careful, but the weight of secrecy feels like that betrothal vow all over again. Still, there's a thrill in the act. You're not just following the rules of courtly love or dowry deals, you're bending fate, like those forbidden lovers in the woods. The potion's a small rebellion, a way to seize control, in a world that's always boxing you in. As you leave the hut, you wonder if it'll work or if love's too wild for even magic to tame. You're not sure, but you're ready to try, vial in hand, heart open, to whatever comes next. You're leaning against a tavern wall, the firelight dancing as a minstrel strums a lute, weaving a tale of star-crossed lovers and daring knights. The crowd's spellbound, and you're no exception. Your heart sways with every note, dreaming of a love as epic as the ones in his songs. In medieval Europe, minstrels and troubadours were the bards of romance, spinning stories that shaped how you think about love. Their tales are a heady mix of fantasy and longing, and you're caught in their spell, wondering if your own story could ever measure up. By the 13th century, minstrels were cultural rock stars, wandering from village to castle, singing of courtly love, heroic quests, and tragic passion. Their songs, like those of the Provençal troubadours, spread ideals of chivalric devotion across Europe. The mainstream fact these performers didn't just entertain, they influenced courtship, inspiring nobles to mimic poetic gestures and peasants to dream beyond their fields. You're listening maybe in a smoky tavern or a lord's hall, and their words make your quiet flirtations at the festival, or that risky love letter feel like part of something grander. The quirky tidbit, some minstrels doubled as spies, slipping coded messages into their songs to stir lovers or lords into action. Imagine a ballad secretly telling you to meet your beloved by the oak at midnight. Historians still argue whether minstrels were romantic idealists or cunning opportunists, using love as a front. You're hoping for the former, but the glint in the singer's eye makes you wonder. The minstrel's voice pulls you in, painting a world where knights die for their ladies and lovers defy kings. You're a peasant maybe, or a minor noble, but these stories make you feel like your own heart's a battlefield. You glance at your sweetheart across the room, their face softened by the fire, and imagine them as the hero of your own saga. But the songs aren't all rosy, they warn of betrayal, like the adulterous affairs we whispered about or broken vows that end in blood. You're torn between inspiration and dread, wondering if love's worth the risk. Here's a joke. Imagine the minstrel forgetting his lines and turning your epic romance into a ditty about a lost cow. Mood ruined. The reality is more subtle. These tales aren't just entertainment, they're a mirror reflecting the rules and rebellions of your world. They glorify courtly love, like those polished games in the castle, but also hint at forbidden passion, echoing your secret trysts. The church, always lurking, tolerates minstrels, but bristles at their worldly themes, ready to preach if the songs get too steamy. Those village gossips, they're here, humming along, ready to twist the lyrics into their next rumor. Yet the music's magic is undeniable. You slip your beloved a look, maybe brush their hand as you pass a tankard, feeling bolder because of the song. The minstrel's tales make you want to be brave to write a story worth singing about, whether it's a quiet peasant love or a daring, noble quest. As the last note fades, you're left with a spark, a reminder that love, however messy, is the stuff of legends. You step out into the night, the melody lingering, ready to chase your own ballad. You're lingering by the village, well, your heart caught on someone whose world feels a universe away, maybe a noble, if you're a peasant, or a servant, if you're a lord's kin. This is cross-class love, a desire that defies the iron walls of medieval society. Every glance you steal is a rebellion against the rules that keep you apart, and the ache in your chest is as much fear as it is longing. In this world, loving across social lines isn't just frowned upon. It's a dangerous dream that could shatter your life like a dropped pitcher. In the 14th century, class divisions were rigid, with nobles, clergy, and peasants locked into distinct roles. Historical records show that marriages rarely crossed these lines as they threatened the social order and inheritance systems. The mainstream fact, cross-class unions, when they happened, often required one party to rise or fall in status, like a noblewoman losing her title to marry a commoner. You're painfully aware that your love could cost you everything: land, honor, or even your place in the village you've known since those courtyard flirtations. The quirky tidbit, some cross-class lovers used go-betweens like a trusted merchant or monk to pass messages or broker secret meetings, turning romance into a covert operation. Picture a peddler smuggling your love note alongside his wares. Historians still argue whether these relationships were driven by genuine passion or by one side chasing status or wealth. You're betting on passion, but the stakes make your hands tremble. You're trying to catch your beloved's eye without drawing suspicion. If you're a peasant, you might linger near the castle gates, hoping to glimpse the noble who's caught your heart. If you're higher born, you're sneaking to the stables to meet the servant who makes you laugh like no courtier ever could. Every moment is stolen, echoing those forbidden trysts in the woods. But the class divide adds a sharper edge. If caught, you're not just shamed, you could be banished, fined, or worse, accused of disrupting God's ordained hierarchy. The church, still preaching from those betrothal days, sees your love as a sin against order, and those village gossips are ready to turn your whispers into a public spectacle. Here's a joke. Imagine confessing your love only for a passing cow to moo louder than your words, nature's way of saying bad idea. The reality is harsher. If you're the lower class lover, you risk being branded an opportunist, maybe beaten or driven out. If you're the higher born, your family might lock you in a tower, literally for nobles, or rush you into a proper marriage to squash the scandal. Yet the pull is unstoppable. You meet in secret, maybe in a hayloft or a shadow chapel, trading promises you both know are fragile. You dream of a world where status doesn't matter, but the weight of dowries, alliances, and those minstrel tales of doomed lovers presses down. There's a flicker of hope though. Some cross-class loves survived often by fleeing to a new town, or winning a rare ally like a sympathetic priest. You cling to that weaving plans with your beloved, knowing each meeting could be the last. The well's water ripples as you lean closer, your fingers brushing theirs. And for a moment, the walls of class feel like they could crumble. But the world's waiting, and you're not sure if love this bold can outrun its shadow. You're standing on a windswept hill, the village below, scarred by war and plague, as you reflect on how love has weathered the storms of medieval life. The Black Death and endless conflicts have reshaped the world, loosening some old rules and tightening others, and romance is no exception. You've lived through courtly flirtations, forbidden trysts, and the weight of dowries. But now, as the 14th century wanes, you see love evolving, more pragmatic for some, more desperate for others. Your heart carries the echoes of every stolen glance and binding vow, and you wonder what the future holds for those chasing sparks in this battered world. By the late 1340s, the Black Death had killed up to half of Europe's population, disrupting social structures and marriage patterns. The mainstream fact, with labor shortages and depleted noble lines, some peasants gained land and mobility, leading to more choice in partners, while nobles scrambled to secure alliances through hasty marriages. You're watching this shift. Widows remarry faster, peasants court beyond their hamlets, and love feels both fragile and urgent against the backdrop of empty fields and silent churches. The quirky tidbit: some survivors turned to plague weddings, rushed ceremonies held in graveyards, to seize joy amid death, often with just a priest and a vow. Picture exchanging rings beside a fresh mound, grim but hopeful. Historians still argue whether these changes freed lovers from tradition or just swapped one pressure for another. You're feeling the tension caught between new possibilities and the ghosts of old rules. War's shadow looms too. The 100 Years' War, raging since 1337, pulls men to battle, leaving women to manage lands or fend off suitors with ulterior motives. You've seen knights ride off their courtly vows forgotten, and peasants scramble to marry before conscription steals their chance. Love's still a battlefield, but now it's tangled with survival. Those village gossips, quieter after the plague, still whisper about hasty matches or lovers lost to war. The church, weakened but stubborn, pushes marriage as a bulwark against chaos, urging you to settle down and rebuild. But after all you've endured, those festival dances, those risky love letters, You're not sure if settling is enough. Here's a joke. Imagine proposing during a plague wedding only for a crow to steal your ring mid-bow. Nature's got no respect. The reality's sobering. Love's grown practical marriages now often merge depleted farms or secure, shaky titles. Yet there's a raw edge to it. Survivors cling to passion, like those forbidden lovers knowing life's too short for cold arrangements. You've seen cross-class couples defy odds, widows seize second chances, and even potions peddled with new fervor. Minstrels sing of hope. Now their ballads less about knights and more about lovers outlasting death. You turn from the hill, the wind, carrying the faint sound of a lute from the village. Love's changed, but its heart defiant, messy human remains. You've carried it through castles, fields, and secret meetings, and it's still worth fighting for, even in this twilight of the old ways. Wind down. Now, let's ease you into sleep. Picture that hill softening under a gentle dusk. The village lights twinkling like stars below. The weight of medieval love, its rules. Its risks fades into a quiet hum, like a distant lullaby. You're no longer bound by dowries or gossips. You're just you resting in this moment. Feel your breath slow each inhale, pulling in calm each exhale, letting go of the day. The world's stories from knights to peasants settle into the earth, leaving only peace. Your bed's a haven, the fans hum, a soft whisper and the night's ready to cradle you. Let your eyes drift shut, your thoughts blur into dreams, where love's a warm glow, free of chains. Sleep deeply carried by the echoes of 1,000 old romances. Sweet dreams.